Hello, I'm Earl Wilson. I'm a retired psychologist, but most important to this series is I'm a recovering sexual addict. And I'm sharing part of my story with you today to help you to understand, those of you who are struggling with the same issues, to help you understand what the process of recovery looks like. Not every journey is the same, but there are elements of the journey that each person has to deal with. In this segment, I'm going to talk about the process of getting started and how that began to impact my emotions. At first, all I had felt was fear, and later on, I began to experience more and more. So we're going downward and inward again in this series. I discovered that deciding or committing to something is much different than doing it, because when you begin to actually carry it out, it requires a whole different level of thinking. And as I was remembering the promises I'd made to the Lord, that is to face it all and forsake it all, and the promises I'd made to Paul and Virginia and to Sandy, that I would in fact share the other aspects of my story, because all they knew at this point was that I'd committed adultery. So the next step for me was to go back to my infamous yellow tablets, because I do my best thinking when I have a yellow tablet and a pen in my hand. And so I went to that and I began to write my sexual history. I found that being alone in the woods in eastern Oregon, sitting in a pickup truck for 3 hours, I was able to go through that process of remembering most of the things that I had done. It was a very painful process, and I began to feel for the first time a remorse that I hadn't let myself feel before. And on occasion, it would be overwhelming. And on other occasions, I'd just be mad at myself. You're a supposedly intelligent man. How could you have done anything that stupid? So it was a very gut-wrenching kind of process, but a very important one. When that was finished, I told Sandy the project's done, and I said, "What do you want to do? Do you want to read it now? Do you want to hear me tell it?" And she said, "I don't know what to do." And we asked a pastor, and he gave us what we both now believe was very bad advice. He said, "Don't share that with her." But we believe strongly if she had never heard the whole story, she would never have been able to go through the process of understanding what changes I need to make if she was going to stay with me, and understanding really what was there. So we're strong believers in telling it all, no secret keeping. And this was getting started in that, was writing that story. Even today, 26 years later, I'll think of things and I'll say, I thought of something today that I'm not sure I ever told you. And we might talk about that. So this was a long process, but writing the sexual history was extremely painful, but extremely important. On the organization side, two important things happened. We did, in fact, find another couple, Larry and Nancy Paulson, who worked with us and became part of what we call a spiritual care team. And they met with us on a regular basis for 3 years. I remember about the second meeting, Nancy said, "This is a lifelong commitment, isn't it? We're never going to get rid of you guys." And I said, "Yeah, I'm afraid so, but I appreciate so much you being there for us." And Larry still meets with me on a regular basis as my accountability person, and Paul and Virginia have regular contact with us. Nancy, who was my prayer warrior for all those years, passed away, and I miss her greatly. So these things took place as far as the spiritual care team, but also I did contact a therapist, and I did decide to go for counseling. I was so ignorant and arrogant at that time. I told Sandy I thought one session would probably do it. We laugh at that often because one session turned into regular meetings for 3 years, and I needed every bit of it. But when I went to see Dan, really I had the view that most people have, and that is, I just want to put this behind me. And so one of the questions I asked him was, how long is this going to take? And he didn't really answer that, but he said, it depends on you, but it'll take a while. And I thought, okay. And then I can remember saying to him, well, how long is this going to go on? And he said, it's never going to be over. And the quicker you get that stupid idea out of your head, the better off you'll be. As a therapist, I was a little critical of his technique at that point. But he got through to me. And I realized that I was making a commitment, not just to putting something behind me, but to really coming to understand myself, to understand the things that were behind my lack of integrity, to understand the reasons why I could give myself permission to live a dual lifestyle for 10 years. So that process of getting started, early on, there was a change in emphasis. And there were a couple questions he asked that helped me with that. He said to me, have you told your dad yet? And I was astounded by the question. And I said, are you kidding? He didn't say anything. And I said, he's an old man. Hearing this would kill him. And he looked at me and he said, I don't know about that. But he said, I know that what you decide to do about that will determine the nature of the relationship you have with him between now and the time he dies. And that caused me to do a lot of thinking. I couldn't tell Dad for about a month. And finally one day I did tell him, and in fact we began to talk. Dr. McIver had told me that if I chose to tell my dad, that I might even get some helpful suggestions from him. But he said, at least you'll have an honest relationship with him and you won't have to lie to him. And that was very important. And that process began to work in my life to where I realized this isn't about just getting this over. It's about getting important changes done. It's about allowing God to work in my life to reconstruct. I thought about that in terms of construction terms. If there's been a washout in the road, you can do lots of things. You can go around it and carry on. You can do a little repair work and maybe get through it. Or you can rebuild it and make the design stronger and firm. And I realized that was what the process that I was committing to. So I called Sandy after that first session and told her that I was sure I'd found the right person. And I was crying because his toughness with me was really God's way of saying to me, I'm going to do some things in your life, but you have to be up to it. You have to be willing to stand the heat. You have to be willing to take a hard look at yourself. You have to be willing to feel some things that you haven't let yourself feel for years. That process continued. About the second time that I saw Dr. McIver, I took a letter from a friend to him. And the letter was, in my judgment, pretty harsh. And it was, in fact, as I called it, a scathing letter. And so I'm sure when I handed it to him, I said, look at this letter my friend sent me. I'm sure I was looking for pity. I'm sure I was looking for somebody to lick the wounds. He read the letter, and I sat there in kind of anticipation, and he looked up at me and he said, wow. And I said, wow, what? And he says, wow, I can't imagine anyone that has a friend like this. I can't imagine anyone whose friend would tell them the truth. And he said, if you're willing to accept this letter as truth, you could change. So the whole emphasis of getting beyond became an emphasis of getting into, getting on with, not over with. And that was the process, the commitment to it and getting started changed the whole perspective of it. It changed it from just, I need to see someone that can help me stop the behavior, to I need to see someone that can help me through the whole process, which was a reconstruction process. I was under construction, and there was a lot of other things. Well, getting started also involved a process of confession, a process of telling. There were many, many people that had relied on me and had heard my teaching and had trusted me and respected me, who needed to know the truth. And it was very difficult, but yet extremely important, because if you're going to be a man of integrity, which was I was desperately knowing I needed, you have to start with who you are. And who I was right then was a pretty sick individual, an individual who'd lived telling himself lies and with lots of thinking errors for a long time. My daughter, who's a recovering alcoholic, said to me one day, she said, you know, Dad, all alcoholics are liars, all addicts are liars, and we just have to get back to the truth. And this is what I was committed to. So I was dealing with thinking errors, but also early on, Dan said, if I'm going to see you, there's some things I demand of you. And I don't want you to come back unless you're willing to do what I ask of you. And what he asked of me was that I would journal every day. And he said, I want you to journal. I don't want you to tell me what you ate for breakfast. I want you to tell me what's going on in your life. I want you to tell me about temptations you faced. I want you to tell me about conflicts you might have had with Sandy or the children. I want you to tell me new feelings that you've discovered or new things that are going on. And even though I'd done a lot of writing at that time, I'd never really written the things that pertain to my inner being. And this was taking me in that direction. But he also used that to shape a new process in me. I remember the first time that I wrote on one of the days I was supposed to journal. I wrote, I was too busy to journal today. And he scratched it out and he put, the truth is you chose not to journal today. And if you choose not to journal other days, you need to write that. And if you choose not to journal enough other days, we will be terminating. So I had to get hold of this. I got hold of the process. So that plus the confessions, I was beginning to realize this is a whole new life. This is a whole new world. But something strange happened, because I felt hope for the first time after that. Not hope that I would get over it. I had been so crazy that I thought that I could just somehow skate past this. But I knew that wasn't going to happen. But I also had a sense that some things could happen inside of me if I trusted God and if I stuck with the process. So the start, even though it was a rough start, was a wonderful start. And as I mentioned before, it continued, the therapy part of it continued for 3 years. The process is still a long ways from over.